Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this year's Transport and Infrastructure Update. I'm Sarah Townsend, editor of Place Northwest. I hope you've enjoyed some networking in the other room. Please do continue to join in with today's event. You can ask questions of our panelists, you can private message other delegates and make the most of the virtual networking by clicking on the different tables and joining the chat. I'd like to thank our sponsors today, Waterman Group, CMS and D2. We've got almost 80 registered guests and an expert lineup of presenters and panelists for you. So it would be a great opportunity to really get under the skin of the transport industry. The event is split into two halves with a networking break in between, and each half will have a presentation followed by a panel. There will also be half an hour's networking at the end, so you can continue making connections and doing business. I'm sure many of you have attended our Remo events before, but for those of you who are a bit less familiar with the platform, the networking opportunity is really the big difference when compared to other platforms such as Zoom. It's useful to create your own profile so that when someone clicks on you, they can see straight away who you are. And do join tables in the main room and video chat with other guests. All you have to do is double click on a table and you'll be taken straight there. There's also messaging in the chat function and of course the Q&A function where you can direct questions straight to our panelists that will then weave into our discussion. We've included a short video guide to getting the most out of Remo, which you can find at the top of your screens to the left of the speaker's green room. Please do let us know your feedback though, because we're always looking to improve. So on to today's agenda. 2020 may have been a quieter year practically for people to get out and about and around the region and the country, but still a lot of activity, policy making, construction and project development has still been going on. There is no doubt that transport and infrastructure is a sector with the power to fuel the post-COVID economic recovery by connecting communities, towns and cities and unlocking wider opportunities for regeneration and growth. This event will therefore explore the outlook for transport and infrastructure over the coming months, celebrate some of the work that's been taking place this year, and do some big picture thinking around the future of transport and travel and its role in creating sustainable communities. So let's kick off. First of all, Rob Naybour, founding partner of architecture firm Weston, Williamson and Partners, will present on the studio's work in the Northwest, in particular its designs for an alternative high-speed 2 hub at Manchester Piccadilly Station. Over to you, Rob.
How's that?
Perfect. Great. Hi, Rob.
Okay. Thanks for the introduction, Sarah. So yes, what I'm going to talk about some work we did for an alternative approach to high-speed 2 at Manchester, and also a little bit about Liverpool. So there was a call earlier this year for from the National Infrastructure Commission for response to suggestions about how Northern Powerhouse Rail integrate better, and this is work that was submitted and to the National but we design infrastructure, we design buildings, and we design the spaces between. So we design everything really that constitutes a city. There you go. So while we're designers, we have a strong track record of delivering big infrastructure projects in particular. So we understand the engineering, we work with engineers and contractors an awful lot. So I suppose we kind of know what we're talking about in respect of infrastructure. We are a UK company. We have grown organically. We have studios now in London and Manchester in the UK, and Melbourne, Sydney in Australia, and in Toronto. Although we've done projects all around the world, but that's where we've established our offices. And I want to be clear, because there's a lot of talk about alternatives to HS2, and I want to be clear that we are supporters of HS2, and we have a lot of experience of working with HS2. This is Old Oak Common Station. We did the original design for the hybrid bill, and now we're working on the master plan of that regeneration area that's around the city. So again, that's around the station. So again, combining sort of master planning, building design, and infrastructure design. And we're also designers for the East Midlands hub at Townsend, And that's some recent images of that station that have been put forward to design panel. And we also worked on the pre-consultation design for Manchester Piccadilly. So we know that site pretty well as well. So looking now at the high-speed 2 route, on the left there you can see the current proposal, which is the Y. The dark blue and the orange there is dark blue is phase 1, and the orange is various phases 2, B and C, which is the familiar Y diagram, and that's probably been around for about 15 years now. And that was determined before there was any project such as Northern Powerhouse Rail. So in response to the idea of how do you integrate Northern Powerhouse Rail, we came up with an alternative proposal along with Expedition Engineers, which actually takes trains through Manchester to Leeds. The Y diagram is still there, not as a high-speed route, but using the classic network. So while actually our own station at Townsend wouldn't be required under this proposal, but we would be able to deliver high-speed trains to the centre of Derby and Nottingham, which is not currently in the current proposal. So at Manchester Piccadilly, what that means is there's the current proposal on the left, which really the high-speed line is tunneled pretty much from Manchester Airport to the outskirts of Manchester, and then it rises for the last little piece to come into Manchester Piccadilly at the same level as the existing station. And what we would propose to do is just keep it in a tunnel, follow the same alignment, and then create an underground station at Manchester, which allows you to tunnel out and carry on with the high-speed lines to Leeds. So, I mean, the funny thing about high speed 2, really, I suppose, is that it's creating a lot of new terminal stations or terminus stations. And the history of railway in this country is really one of creating terminus stations and then trying to making them into through stations, and that's been done at lots of places. I mean, Edinburgh Waverley, bottom right there, is a good example, which was a terminus station, and there's a through station now. And as with most of these stations, there is a drive to increase the through capacity and curtail the terminus capacity because it's so much more efficient. When you look at Europe, the story is even more dramatic, and there are some very big station redevelopment projects in Europe, which are, I mean, there's Madrid, Atocha, and then we're about to start work on the Chamartín station, which makes a through station the other side of Madrid. There's Vienna there. All of these are big through stations getting rid of terminus stations. So the same is about to happen there's lots that aren't listed there. The same is about to happen in Marseille to take the high-speed line down to Nice. So that's basically currently HS2 is creating a lot of terminus stations, one of which is at Manchester Piccadilly, and our proposal is there to keep the station underground and make a through station. So the alternative proposal on the right shows an underground box construction. That's a sort of engineering term, but a box-shaped hole in the ground, and that's about 900 meters, a kilometer long, and it contains the switches and crossings, and then 400-meter long platforms in about the middle of that green box, and that allows you to tunnel out to Leeds and connect to the wider network the other side of Manchester. That's very, very similar in size, actually, that box, to the kilometre-long box that is being built right now for High Speed 2 at Old Oak Common on the outskirts of London. And it's also very similar in width. So you can see there isn't, we've said that's the current proposal for the way Northern Powerhouse Rail and High Speed 2 interact. There are at Manchester Piccadilly, there are drawings that show that. That is very difficult because High Speed 2 is constructed first, so you're constructing the upper level first, and then you're coming in and tunneling a station beneath. Now, I'm not personally aware of any station of this sort of size which has been constructed in tunnels like that underneath an existing station. There's been work done at Antwerp, but it's a completely different form of construction. That's extremely challenging to create 400-meter long platforms with all the numbers of people that creates underneath an existing station like that. So our proposal is to create that underground box and combine the High Speed 2 and the Northern Powerhouse Rail platforms. Now, we can get away with fewer platforms because we're taking trains through rather than terminating and turning them round. So it's a much more efficient proposal, which is again why Europe is generally getting rid of their terminus stations. We then create a concourse. We use the concourse to link the levels, to link from the concourse level of the existing Piccadilly to a public space, which connects to a redirected tram, reorganized tram. And that's a kind of sketch view of that. Here's the tram reorganized towards the canal. This space, and we create a lot of development over the station itself, similar to the proposals at Old Oak Common, and you can get in some quite big buildings as we're showing there. But not only that, by coming into Manchester in tunnel, you avoid the kind of separation and the segregation that the viaduct causes, and also the loss of developable land and all the difficulties of separation that these railway structures cause once they're above ground. I mean, the portal itself is a huge structure. So there's the diagram of how that works. You can see the tram in yellow. You see the platforms that's roughly a kilometre long box there with the platforms at 400 metres, and the concourse is used as a link into Manchester Piccadilly. A new public space here connects to the tram at street level, and it allows, it always seems to me that Manchester, the undercroft of Manchester Piccadilly is underutilized. So that space serves to link into New Islington and onto Ancoats and the Canal Basin and so on and so forth. So bring people down to ground, which will inevitably produce a more sort of pedestrian friendly environment, and it opens up the potential of using the undercroft of Manchester Piccadilly station. Again, that's a sort of similar view, a photo montage showing how that fits with the city. Then tunneling out of Manchester, we've also thought about the route across to Leeds, following the M62 corridor, a tunnel, a short section of tunnel through the Pennines, which is inevitable if we're really going to have a new route, if Northern Powerhouse Rail is going to have a new route between Leeds and Manchester. And we're suggesting 2 parkway stations as well on the high-speed line, one at sort of East Lancs near Rochdale and one at Bradford. And the diagram on the right is pretty complex, but that shows the number of train paths. So each one of those lines is a train per hour, and you can see that you can deliver. You're still getting 4 trains an hour into Leeds from London, but you're also getting the connectivity across the network. Many more. There's possibility for many more trains into Manchester Piccadilly, and they would all be high-speed trains. So the capacity and the service profile is phenomenal for Leeds and the northern region. So looking towards the west as well, we did this piece of work. This is a very short presentation of the Liverpool work, but we did this piece of work for Denise Barrett-Baxendale, who's chair of Steve Rotherham's Station Commission, and they've been keen. This is the brief, this is the remit for a high-speed station in Liverpool, which seems to be back on the cards. And there's all the good stuff there, the connectivity. There's lots of people lobbying for the high-speed connection into Liverpool. And so this is a response to that. And what we did, there's a plan of Liverpool with some of the key opportunities and constraints. You know, you've got the UNESCO World Heritage Site. You can see the loop here with the connection across to Birkenhead, and you know there's available development sites. What we did here was we looked at 5 possible locations. There's 2 existing tunnels as well, and we've suggested making use of those alignments to look at different locations around Liverpool. And what we did was, I'm just going to show this side. We looked at 5 different sites, and what's really interesting here, we found that the cost of the stations was pretty comparative, but when we did an economic analysis, we found huge differences in the GVA, the investment and the regenerative growth that the different locations could offer by locating the station perhaps on the city edge where land was already potentially moving and connecting the waterfront better and so on and so forth. Now, I know that this one on the left is where efforts are focused at the moment, and that site 1 is actually near Liverpool Lime Street, which is very challenging anyway. Technically, it's very challenging to do that. But you can see that some of these other sites which connect the waterfront can generate substantially more GVA per annum, you know, based on the development, the regeneration, and the jobs and homes that can be developed around the improved transport connection. So I think this piece of work, I suppose it links to the Manchester piece, because what we're saying is that these infrastructure decisions are not just based around technical criteria, but they should be really being thought about in a sort of general regenerative context. So that's with the Station Commission in Liverpool, and we'll see what they make of it. It's also with the National Infrastructure Commission, and we'll see how that comes out very shortly. So that's my presentation. I hope it sparks some thoughts amongst the people here. I'll now stop sharing my screen, and I'll put myself in the hands of Sarah.
Thanks so much for that, Rob. Some really interesting designs there, and a good introduction to our first panel discussion, I think. So we're going to be looking at transport and infrastructure as an economic growth driver, both now and in the future. So I'd like to welcome to the stage our other panelists, please. Tim Foster, Head of Policy, Strategy, Economics and Research at Transport for the North. David Moore, Partner at CMS. Laura Langridge, Architect at Knight Architects. And Rob of Weston, Williamson and Partners. If our speakers could activate their cameras and mics if they haven't done so already. And to our audience, please do remember to submit any questions to our panel through the Q&A button, and we'll try to get through as many of those as possible. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Sarah.
Tim, could I start with you, if that's all right? Transport for the North published its £5 billion economic recovery plan in August, and that sets out a strategy for how more and cleverer investment in transport and infrastructure can help steer the region and the country out of this sort of COVID-enforced slowdown. Can you give us a quick overview of the main points of the strategy, and how do you believe transport can successfully boost growth?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. And thanks to Rob for a really interesting presentation. I think some of those themes we'll come back to in the discussion. As people will doubtless know, Transport for North was established to make the case for long-term transformational investment in the north of England's transport network. And in 2019, we published our strategic transport plan and long-term investment programme, and that was very much designed to think about all the interventions that can really drive growth in the north and support the levelling up agenda and rebalancing of the UK economy. But over a very long period of time, clearly the events of 2020 and the economic impacts of COVID have really challenged us to think now about what are the things within the programme that we need to accelerate and bring forward to support the economic recovery, and that's both in terms of what are the right investments to make now to drive to get the transport network going again, and to deal with some of the big capacity and other constraints on the transport network that were a problem prior to 2020, but also to do that in a way that allows us to create a continuous pipeline of transport investment, not least to drive growth and the regeneration benefits, but also to create confidence, I think, and a construction pipeline. So what Transport for North has done really over the first half of the year is work with partner authorities right across the north to identify the schemes that can be brought forward and deliver early, and that's why we've created a package of what's really 150 schemes that could be delivered both in the short term within 6 to 18 months, but also to start accelerating larger investments and get them closer to delivery, particularly in terms of bringing forward elements of Northern Powerhouse Rail. But also within the programme, a very strong focus on active travel, sustainability, on supporting things like EV charging and digital infrastructure, which are going to be the really kind of key things in terms of getting the north moving again.
Brilliant, thanks, Tim. We will come back to discuss some of those points here in more detail, I think, throughout the rest of the discussion. But Laura, from Knight Architect, you designed the replacement Pooley Bridge after the original was washed away in Storm Desmond. Could you tell us a bit about that project and how you went about it? I believe it's recently completed and open to the public. And maybe a bit about any other regional projects that you've been involved in.
Yeah, so Pooley Bridge, which is a project on a very small scale when you compare it to the projects that Rob was looking at earlier. It's a 40-meter bridge, and it's a very small community in the Lake District, which in 2015, as Sarah said, lost their bridge to flooding. It was a 250-year-old stone arch bridge that gave the community its name and provided the main access to the Lake District and their source of income, which was mainly tourism-based industry. So when that bridge was gone, clearly there was a huge disruption to the community. They had to go 40 minutes out of their way just to get across the river, which used to be a 30-second walk kind of thing. So it was a major disruption to the businesses, and also a loss of identity for the community as well, in terms of just how much they valued this structure. So we worked with them to develop a new bridge in this location, and it was really important that the replacement bridge satisfied both the emotional and functional requirements in this place. So not purely just providing access, but also engaging with the needs for identity and strengthening the landscape in which this bridge sits as well.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Laura. David from CMS, what are your own observations of the region's transport and infrastructure sector currently? Is it meeting its potential, and if not, why not? And what do you see as sort of some of the biggest impacts from COVID and the sort of uncertainty of this year?
Okay, thanks. A very broad question there. My perspective may be somewhat historic, and because 20 years ago I was seconded to something called the Strategic Rail Authority, which some of you may remember fondly, or may remember in other ways. And I was responsible for developing the Northern franchise. So I spent a lot of my time visiting the PTEs. There are 5 PTEs in the Northern franchise, and I spent a lot of time visiting them. And so I could see that the potential that the PTs offered. You could see the transition going from PT land to non-PT land. I mean, it was palpable. So there was lots and lots of potential, but there seemed to be two impediments to development. And the first impediment, I thought, was actually government, because there's clearly a mistrust between government and the PTs, which I don't think reflected well on government at all, but that sort of held things back. But the other issue I spotted was that there's sort of internal competition between the different regions in the north, and there's different parts of the north competing with different other parts of the north. I remember going to a meeting once where someone from Darley Dale was arguing with someone from Derby about which was better, and that these are just a few miles down the road. So I mean, I thought there's loads and loads of potential. It's clearly quite a diverse area. And I think that's sort of one difference between the north, if you like, and London. London isn't regionalised in that same sort of way, and probably because it's a city, works more holistically. But if you could encourage that sort of homogenous working across the north, or maybe allocation of responsibilities across the north, I think there's a lot more could be achieved.
Okay, thanks, David. I mean, actually, as a follow-up question for you then, sort of looking specifically at rail then, I mean, I'm sure you saw the government made nearly 600 million, 580 million, something available to kickstart rail upgrades across the north in July. So do you, from your sort of, long experience, is this funding enough to sort out some of these long-term challenges in regional rail infrastructure that you touched on?
No, it's not really. I mean, it's a start, isn't it? If HS2 is costing 100 billion, then this is less than 1% of that, isn't it? So it's I mean, rail is expensive, so no, it's nowhere near enough. I think, I mean, I don't claim to be an economist, but I think one of the problems with the way that these transport schemes are looked at is that they don't look at the full economic benefit of the scheme to the wider economy. And if you look at something like Manchester Metro, I mean, that's been transformative for Manchester. But I suspect that when the economic modelling was done, the sort of the real advantages for the locality and the people who live there was never assessed. It probably had a positive business case, but that's on the basis of other benefits. But the real benefits, I'm sure, were much greater than actually the modelling suggested. So really, I think government needs to be a bit more confident about spending a bit of money to reap the sort of enormous rewards that transport can give.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, David. Rob, a question for you. Obviously, you've shown us Weston Williamson's design proposals for the HS2, but what do you think are the opportunities here more generally for the region's property and development sector based on the latest HS2 plans on the table? You touched on it briefly in your presentation, but in terms of addressing some of these issues that David's mentioned, perhaps you could comment on that.
Yeah, I think there's definite tension between kind of wanting to get boots on the ground, as it were, or hard hats, or, in the newspapers, or start spending money and getting jobs immediately. And there is about a coordinated plan that really provides. There's a danger that some of the early projects might get in the way, and in the rail, there's 100 years of experience of this. The rail sector sort of builds something and then undoes it very quickly. And in the 19th century, they did that really rapidly, but they had huge amounts of money and investment piling into it then. And I think we've really got to be careful that we do the right thing, not just do the easy thing. So so the last couple of slides about Liverpool are really pertinent. We did that with Borough Happold, who are engineers. They're design engineers, very good design engineers, but they also have started they've got economists now, because they see this. They work around the world as we do, and what they're seeing is that this economic people in other countries are taking a broader view of the economic benefit of infrastructure, and I think we're lagging a little bit behind that. We are still relying on the transport case, not taking enough account of the wider regenerative benefits. And particularly at the moment, I think we're looking a bit dated, because money is still really cheap. It's almost free, and you can afford to take, therefore, a long-term view of these investments, and the payback period. You can actually factor in a lot of these developments now, and it was challenging in the past.
Excellent, thanks, Rob. Tim, would you like to comment on this at all? What would be, from your position, what would be your latest asks in terms of Northern Powerhouse Rail? Where next for it? How can it sort of link up all of the other transport strategies across the Northwest more effectively? Also link with sort of franchise provider operators. Feels like probably many moons ago to most of us, sort of not commuting so much anymore, but the saga with Northern Rail at the beginning of the year, franchise take back. This was the culmination of a couple of years of frustration, wasn't it? And sort of capacity and service issues. So what's your latest ask, really?
Yeah. Thank you. So, and just to sort of go back to a couple of points that David and Rob were just making, actually. So, the difference with Northern Powerhouse Rail compared to something like Transpennine route upgrade or HS2 for that matter, is that we are designing and developing Northern Powerhouse Rail alongside DFT, and actually most of the sort of detailed development work is being done by Transport for the North, with lots of support from DFT, Network Rail, and HS2 Limited. And so that feels that Northern Powerhouse Rail feels to us very different to a project like Transpennine route upgrade, in which TfN is a stakeholder, in which our members have given quite clear views about Transpennine upgrade and what we want to see from it, particularly in terms of sort of capacity and resilience on the network. But yeah, Northern Powerhouse Rail, we in the latest round of development, we've been sort of working through all the options, and all the evidence is just coming together right now for Northern leaders to come together and agree which options should be taken forward. The vision for Northern Powerhouse Rail that we set out in our strategic transport plan of connecting the cities with fast, frequent services through a long pipeline of interventions, starting with early upgrades, particularly in Yorkshire and in the east, in advance of HS2, and then building on HS2 with new lines serving Liverpool to Leeds, but with really important intermediate calling points at Bradford, Warrington, and other places. I think creating that sort of very, very integrated network. So that's where we are on Northern Powerhouse Rail, very close to being able to present to government the kind of final agreed version of the network, and that process is going on now. The integrated rail plan and the post DOCAV work by the National Infrastructure Commission and others to look at how HS2 and NPR can best be integrated, and ultimately really to set an overall funding envelope for that is the really critical next step after that. After which we want to accelerate development, and again in our economic recovery plan, we've identified the parts of the Northern Powerhouse Rail network that could be accelerated and delivered from the mid 2020s onwards. I think that the points about funding, about having certainty about long-term funding on rail, particularly in the long term for the Midlands and the North, is a really important point. As well as because I think going back to the point about linking transport to economic development, having that certainty about investment and what's going to happen, so that actually HS2 and NPR in the North become defined projects that people can understand and know when they're coming, what they're going to look like, and then put in all the things around it to make it work, whether that's sort of skill strategies, innovation strategies, the maximising the regeneration potential. I think that's going to be the really key conversation, I think, over the next 2-3 years about how we maximise the value of that investment.
Sure, absolutely. As you say, funding, it needs the money behind it, and there perhaps needs to be this stronger case made for how all of those sort of regenerative benefits sort of link up and stack up. I want to bring David and Laura, loop them back in shortly, but just before we move on from rail specifically, should we take a look at these couple of audience questions that have come through that are both about HS2? I think they're probably both for you, Rob. We've had one from Graham Sant. An underground HS2 station at Piccadilly is the right solution. Metrolink access could cause a bottleneck. Have we considered an underground metro station and underground metro across the city? Do you have any comment on a response on that, Rob?
Well, I think that's a separate project. I think yeah, I think the principle of underground and carrying on through is the important thing. I think in a way Manchester's made its decision with the tram, putting that above ground and using the existing rail network. Although, you know, the next addition to that could be underground, depending where it went. But I would see that as almost the next question.
Sure. Okay. Does anyone else want to comment on that before we address the second question? Okay. So the second question, Marcel Ridyard. As there is now a moment to rethink phase 2B, where does Rob feel the phase 2B will go?
Phase 2B being the Manchester crew to Manchester, and I'm not sure. I keep losing track. Actually, is 2B still the route up to Leeds via Townsend? Yeah. Well, I think the government's already said they're going to split that into two separate approval schemes, so two separate hybrid bills through Parliament. I don't know. I think I'm sort of, I'm not really operating in my own interests here, but I do think there's other ways of doing the eastern leg and making better use of the current connections into city centres. I do. Townsend is a great station if you want to go there. It's very quick to get there, and but it does need a lot of local infrastructure, and I do wonder whether we might not be better going into Derby and Nottingham on the classic network. So I don't know where it's going. We're waiting with bated breath on the integrated rail plan. And I think there's everybody seems to be. Everybody I speak to, because we've spoken to a lot of people about this, seem to be in a terrible hurry to get going, and I think I support that, but we need to be careful we need to make sure we're not getting in the way of doing the right thing later.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Rob. Okay, let's do a bit of sort of future gazing on sort of travel trends. Laura, there's been this. I wonder what are the sort of long-term travel plans that the region and probably the country as well will need to preempt and accommodate when developing sort of transport and infrastructure projects over the coming months and years?
Yeah, I think looking to the future, it's really important to start at these wider questions, similar to what Rob was saying about addressing kind of wider questions of economic growth, but looking at very basically who are these projects serving and why are they important? And then very often we kind of jump right into the project. Okay, what is it made out of? Right, like trying to get it all figured out without addressing these wider concerns. And I think that when you start with that, when you really look at so who are you making it for? Is it comfortable? Is it accessible? Are people going to enjoy using it? Is it going to be something that really fits into life of every day? Is it going to provide the benefit for people that we need it to? And why is it important? So things like economic development, regenerative impact as well. So really taking a broad view and then using that to inform the development right from the get-go will then, I think, lead to much more positive and lasting legacy in transport in general than not addressing these issues at the beginning.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Laura. David, what's been your observation of the sort of rising focus on active travel during the supporting the low carbon agenda with a sort of car-free, safer streets type strategy? Is that here to stay? Should it be here to stay?
Well, I suppose, I mean, I think, well, speaking personally, I think it'd be quite nice if it's here to stay. It'd be nice if people walked more and cycled more and that sort of thing. It'd be good for them and good for the environment. But I think to really encourage that, you need sort of strong policies to deliver it. So you need, people would like, cycle lanes, so it's safe. You possibly need someone to park your bike. You may need a shower when you get to work. If you're looking to encourage, fewer cars in the cities, then you probably need to think about car parking and how available that is. You could pedestrianize cities, but then you'd need to think about, what about disabled people? What about emergency services? What about people who live there and deliverers? So, I mean, it's all quite a difficult issue, but I think the cities will change. I mean, I think more and more of us will be working from home in the future, and the demand for big offices and going into a city centre may well reduce, is my guess. So yeah, cities will change, and I think that they'll need to adapt, and that they may become more living places where people go to for recreation rather than to go to for work, and that could drive change in travel plans. I mean, as regards trains, there are sort of three types of user. There's the commuter. Well, I suspect that will drop. There's the business traveller, and I think that may well drop as well as people communicate like this. And then there's the leisure traveller, and who knows? But that may well stay the same. That may increase. There may be a pent-up demand. But I'm sure we'll see change.
You touched on it there. Oh, yeah, of course, Laura. Yeah, you go.
No, you can go ahead. I just wanted to put my 2 cents in here as well. I completed my master's degree in the Netherlands, and so very kind of biking-based culture. And I think what really worked well there was the ability to transfer very easily from one mode of transport to another. So during my course there, they finished the station building, and you could bike right straight into the station building. There was a huge bike parking garage that you could lock your bike up, get on a train, be at the airport in 40 minutes, and all with a certain level of confidence that your bike is still going to be there when you get back in 2 weeks. So there's this kind of, I think when you're looking at creating a car-free city or these kinds of agendas, it's these interfaces that if they're not smooth, if they're not thought out, then it kind of breaks down and people aren't able to use the whole system as the way that it's intended.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, here. I mean, I think you don't get. I mean, rail is part of a more active travel plan, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And there are parts of Scandinavia where there has to be a cycle hire associated with the station. So this. If we look at the amount of money that we spend on car travel, as a nation, it's phenomenal. And and if we could find a way to sort of, it's a big debate, but I think this change to more active travel does support a more integrated thinking around development, where development is, the kind of public space that we have around stations. It's a big debate.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Yeah, sorry, David, go ahead.
No, I mean, there was something that I think is quite overdue in this country is road pricing. I mean, roads are effectively the last great unregulated utility. And I think in the paper this week, there's stuff about the Chancellor looking at road pricing, primarily because as people move away from carbon-based fuels to electric cars, the fuel duty will fall. But that seems to be a huge opportunity to change the way that people use their cars and think about when they drive and what they drive and where they're driving. And I think that could all be part of this equation as well.
And I think what you've all touched on as well, which is about the development implications of this, you know, when we look at how new transport systems, new transport modes could actually sort of change the urban layouts. I wonder, Tim, how much is that part of your work at the moment, to sort of link in with the sort of city plans that are being developed, maybe the developers themselves? You know, what are the opportunities and the sort of gaps there?
Yeah, it's a really huge part of a lot of what we've been doing. And again, going back to the earlier discussion about appraisal and the way in which transport schemes are assessed, we from the outset have recognised that we needed to factor in not just the kind of the business as usual view of the north, but actually building on the north that we want to create. And that's both about using the independent economic review to give us an alternative kind of view of growth, of population density, and of places, but also to invest very heavily in understanding particularly kind of local plans, spatial plans, and be able to really represent the sort of the full regeneration impacts of schemes, both through the kind of economic modelling, but also in a very real sense, kind of working through with local partners and transport delivery bodies exactly how to sort of maximise those kind of regeneration opportunities. So, you know, a really big part of the conversation around Piccadilly that Rob talked through at the beginning is around the land take of the different station options. And understanding the regeneration. Not in context of Piccadilly, but actually some really strong and very clear spatial plans, both from the council and from the wider combined authority, and so lots of opportunity and ambition. In Manchester, where actually sort of marginal land take does play a big role, but we've also been kind of quite heavily involved in spatial development around places like, particularly around Bradford, actually, where you know, a big growing diversity with a young population, huge amounts of economic potential, but actually really poorly connected, particularly by rail, and really ill served by rail. And so lots of work on what are the opportunities that come from really putting Bradford at the heart of the North Rail network, and what does that mean in terms of regeneration potential, but also for skills, innovation, and investment. So yeah, lots of technical. How do we quantify all of that and build that into the business case, so we're making the best possible case for investment? But actually, as we get closer to delivery, how do we make sure that we're really sort of designing and integrating different policy interventions coherently?
Great, thanks, Tim. I think that'll be a really interesting one to watch, won't it? I've actually got another question for you, but let's look at this question from the audience. With the end of lockdown 1.0, did we miss, or have we missed, the boat for real change towards active travel? So going back to our previous points, you know, there might have been more demand for this, but with the lack of infrastructure being in place, have we all just gone back to the car? What do you think about that, Laura?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we want to kind of promote this active travel or cycling networks, it needs to be more convenient than using a car, or more comfortable or cheaper. And I think in some ways perhaps we have, but I do think with the end of lockdown, I think people have become really interested in it, and I think that there is an opportunity now to really grab hold of that momentum and hopefully bring change that might not be in place at the moment in terms of infrastructure development.
Okay, thank you.
Just one. I mean, the first lockdown, of course, coincided with a nice British summer, so we're all happy to put our shorts on and, you know, get our bikes out. But the second lockdown coincided with a rather damp autumn, so there's possibly rather less enthusiasm for cycling.
True. Yeah, very true. Okay. Just one question for you, Tim, which is just taking us into a slightly different space, which is about technology, and when we're looking to the future of transport, yeah, we also have to think about technology. Transport for the North has launched, I think it's an 150 million integrated and smart travel program. I think it was this year, and this is about smart ticketing and so on. So what's the scope to use smart technology to make transport and travel more efficient and also improve the infrastructure as well?
Yeah. So from the outset of TFN, as well as thinking about the big infrastructure things that are needed, then we've had a smart travel program, originally kind of presented a bit, not necessarily by us, as a kind of oyster card for the North. I think, and where we've made quite a lot of progress, particularly on the rail side, but some of the original vision for what we need in terms of a pan-northern system. Again, it's interesting in terms of just how quickly things have moved on from in the early days thinking that we need to design sort of big back office systems to bring bus and rail together, but actually the technology has moved on hugely. So we took a decision we were going to focus primarily on rail and introduce some new products this year. As part of the economic recovery plan, then we're also focusing on how do we accelerate some of that activity with government. And there's now a really, really strong focus on innovation, and that's partly there's a competitive process that's out at the moment to really encourage people to bring forward different ideas and opportunities. I think in the recognition that this really does need to be an ecosystem to work effectively, to really sort of bring forward lots of different ways of doing this and work out what works best for passengers.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Can I say one challenge to a smart ticketing system? I think is that the agreement which governs the fare system in the UK for rail is called the Ticketing and Settlement Agreement. It's an enormous document and it's probably hugely out of date. But essentially, if a train operator wants to do something smart for its fares, which no other train operator can use, it can do so. But as soon as you want to bring in another train operator, then the second train operator has to agree to it. And this creates a real impediment to development. Now, of course, those impediments can be overcome and have been overcome in London. But there's a real difficulty there. And I think the other difficulty is that with this sort of patch we're talking about now, you can have things like advance tickets. So you can buy a ticket 8 weeks in advance and it's much cheaper. Whereas in London, you don't have that. There's no advance ticket for the tube. You just turn up and buy a ticket. So I'm sure it can be achieved, but it's quite a complicated issue to solve.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think that takes me seamlessly on to a question I was going to direct to you anyway, which is about the policy and regulatory side of all of this. So you've mentioned this particular ticketing legislation, but what other kind of moves and changes are needed, do you think, to unlock better transport projects and sort of encourage take up?
Well, I think the sort of legal side, if you like, is fine. There are things you'd change, like the ticketing and settlement agreements, which I mentioned, which is probably a bit out of date and could be doing with refreshing. I think what really slows things down is just the sort of planning and political and decision-making process. And hitherto, you've had a planning process which looks at both the policy of whether you should implement a change and then how to do it. And so any inquiry, gets wrapped up into is this scheme a good idea? And of course, there'll be people saying, no, don't do it at all. Some people saying, yes, do it. And then there's the supplementary question, if you're going to do it, how are we going to do it? Now, there's a process called development consent orders, which sort of gets around that, but it does need, so that deals with the process of implementing something, but you still need to have the policy decision to do it first. And it's that policy decision which is so difficult, and actually settling on a solution. I mean, we've had all sorts of different ideas for HS2 just on this session, and there are the conversations going on in London as well as to whether to go to Euston or whether to go south around to HS1, all that sort of stuff. And I mean, all these are great ideas, but at some point we need to decide what we're going to do, and we need to get on and do it, don't we? And stop talking about it and just do it. So I think probably the legal side is fine. The sort of procedural side could probably do with a bit of bit of encouragement. The other side I think is the sort of financing side, where I think it's a good idea if you try and tie a transport project together with a property project, because the two do benefit each other, and so you can reap the benefits of both. But if you have a privately financed scheme and you are either investing in the railway or investing in the real estate, each is dependent on the other, and so each will look nervously at the other, because that could have an impediment on have a real bearing on whether you get repaid. So that's a challenge, and I wonder whether that's a challenge which only government can assume, because government can actually take that risk and actually reap the benefits of it as well. So maybe there's a bigger role for a well-founded government.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, David. What about Rob? Do you think on the sort of transport planning side, from your experience of, I know you're not a planning consultant, but do you have any sort of any feedback on how well that system's working when it comes to actually putting together the designs, putting together the plans, and taking them through the process?
Yes, I do really. I've done a lot of these schemes. I took a large part of Thameslink through public inquiry. We've done 5 projects for Crossrail, which was a hybrid bill, and we've taken those right the way through, just finishing off construction. And it's and we've done similar with HS2, and I do think there's a kind of, yeah, you can only object to a scheme. There's no real mechanism for supporting. I'll just, it's very much the planning process, and we've seen, and I think a lot of the costs of HS2 are quite honestly in the quite generous and wide-ranging property acquisition, which is not just what's required to build the railway, but it's those properties which are deemed to be affected within a mile or so. So I think there's massive room for improvement. I'll talk about sort of other areas where we're working in Australia. To go back to David's point, we've got a PPP there for Melbourne Metro, which is an enormous scheme, which includes the tunnels, the stations, the public realm, and the buildings on top. And we've got a mechanism there to sort of isolate the property development. It's still part of the PPP offer, but there is a mechanism there to isolate the property development and the risks associated with that, and the risks associated with the rail development. So all this is feasible. I just think there's I could talk a lot about this. When the Metropolitan Railway, they built the Metropolitan line in London. They got the rights to develop alongside the railway, and they made more money, and they provided more benefit to London out of developing the northwest London than they ever did out of running trains. And I think there's opportunity to think much more holistically about the places we're creating. Transport creates places, but we kind of deny that when we're thinking about these transport problems. We sort of regard them as an irritation, but they actually bringing transport connectivity creates places, and I think we need to change our attitude around that.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I've probably gone on too much there.
No, that's fine. We've got another few minutes left. Sorry, Tim, were you going to speak or no? No, okay.
You're going to agree violently with Rob about creating places. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. Well, look, we've got one more question from the audience, from Graham Sand. Does the panel still see the HM Treasury Green Book's over-reliance on cost-benefit analysis a continuous challenge for the North's development. I mean, we've touched on these funding issues. David spoke of them. Do you want to respond to that one, David?
Yes, I think is the answer to that one. I mean, I think because it doesn't capture all the benefits. That's the trouble. I think transport schemes tend to give rise to many more benefits than are captured through the Green Book analysis. So, so I would say the answer is yes to Graham's question.
Okay, Tim, do you have a view on that one?
Yeah, I think I think that's right. I think there's some technical things you could do in the Green Book to really sort of recognise the net positive impacts that come from growth in particular areas. The big fundamental problem with the Green Book is there's an assumption in it that says effectively if one place grows as a result of investment, somewhere else must do worse as a result. So that sort of zero-sum game element is a problem, and there are one or two other technical problems. But there's a broader issue here, which is about actually, we've been talking throughout this about the need to join up decision making on regeneration, transport, skills. Each department has its own interpretation of the Green Book, and for us, there's just too much inconsistency between different appraisal frameworks. A number of people have identified those challenges. I think if in sorting out the Green Book, government also needs to sort out its decision making, particularly around investments that really place-based investments, frankly, and take a different, more holistic approach.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Tim. I think that's a good point to sort of end, to wrap up now. It's sort of a call to central government, and a reminder to our audience. If you do have further questions to our panelists that you haven't had a chance to ask in this session, then you can have the sort of direct messaging with between delegates at this event. So, and of course, we've got almost half an hour's networking now. So I think that's all we've got time for now. So a virtual round of applause to our speakers for a brilliant conversation, and to our attendees as well for your input. Could I ask you to stay on for this networking break, and we'll be back for the second half presentation and panel at 11:20. Let's switch to networking mode. Thank you very much, and see you shortly. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again on the main stage. Councillor David Meller, Cabinet Member for Economy and Regeneration at Stockport Council, will now present an overview of Stockport's 12-year station revamp plan, worth an estimated £550 million, and it was unveiled earlier on this year. So over to you, David. Welcome.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me this morning. Much obliged. I'm just going to try and get this going. So give me a second. Hopefully this is going to work. Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. So, like I say, I'm Councillor David Meller. I'm the Cabinet Member for Economy and Generation on Stockport Council. Obviously, lots of exciting things going on, if I say so myself, in Stockport, and this is one of the key components of that. Really, this is our master plan, our growth prospectus for Stockport Station. And as many of you will know, we've obviously got the Mayoral Development Corporation, the MDC, and what we're hoping to do is essentially link the MDC into developing Stockport Station for the longer term. We feel there's a hell of a lot of untapped potential there with the station, but also it's a key station, and it's a key area really to develop the transport opportunities that we have in Greater Manchester, and to develop things like the capacity that we need on the line, to also support Manchester and Salford's aspirations to have 90% of journeys made in peak times in the morning made by clean means, public transport, and so on. So it links into a lot of what not only we want to do, but I believe what Greater Manchester wants to do as well. So sort of kick off really. So what we hope the growth prospectus does is it brings together all the interventions that we would like, or we feel that are needed around the station in the next 20 years. And obviously we want to essentially use the station as a way of further developing the town centre and developing place. Indeed, throughout Stockport, what we're hoping to do is sort of take this model that we're looking to do in the town centre and put it into district centres as well, where we've got train stations that serve immediate communities. We want to use public transport and stations as a way to not only encourage cleaner transport, to encourage people to use public transport, but to try and help regenerate places. So of course, you know, as many of you will probably know, with using Stockport station in the past, whether you're going into London and wherever, it does need a bit of investment, shall we say, and this sort of recognises that we, you know, it does need some improvements for passenger experience, but also in terms of the capacity as well, which obviously I just suggested earlier on, or just hinted at earlier, and of course, what we want to do is also emphasise that really we want Stockport Station to be a gateway to the north. So not only into Greater Manchester, but indeed conversations I've been having with other local authorities, such as Derbyshire and with Cheshire East. Stockport Station has a strategic importance there as well. So it's very, very much, you know, it's a key component really, and it links into a lot of needs that other local authorities and indeed Greater Manchester has as well. So as I said there, it sets out the ambition to grow Stockport Station as a hub for Greater Manchester and beyond. And obviously with the MDC, we feel that the station can support the MDC and again begin that transition away from being a very car dependent culture, I suppose, within Stockport and particularly, I guess, within the centre, and to move up towards getting people to use clean and public transport. Indeed, I'm particularly passionate about developing walking and cycling within Stockport. It's something that I would certainly argue we're doing pretty well on, really, as a borough within Greater Manchester. There's still more work to do, but again, it sort of just links into that piece of work as well. So, I mean, if you want to look at what we feel that you know, what the MDC is about, I suppose, and what we want the station to do as well. So, you know, with the MDC, it's about bringing jobs to the area. It's about supporting 3,500 new homes. And of course, we want to ensure that we've got the best connectivity that we can get within the borough. And of course, it mentions HS2 there. And that's something I will always badger on about, particularly the fact that at the moment, HS2 connectivity into Stockport, certainly when it gets to the end point, is somewhat up in the air, and that's something that we're continually having to push, and we are pushing with TFGM and others to ensure that we don't lose that connectivity into London and losing any benefits that HS2 can bring, because ultimately that could undermine all the work that we're doing with the MDC, and we want the MDC to be a model that can be replicated throughout the country. So in terms of the current issues that we've got then with the station, so obviously, as I've said, connectivity is a bit of a problem. We have got at the moment, it is a pinch point really on the network. It's a bit of a bottleneck in terms of us wanting to, you know, in terms of getting more services onto the network. And as I said earlier on, with the city centre transport strategy that's just out for consultation at the moment, addressing capacity at Stockport is going to be, in my opinion, a key component of delivering of Manchester, Salford and TFGM's ambitions to deliver those clean journeys and the bulk of those clean journeys in the peak periods. So we've got to try and address that. As people will know, in terms of whether they've visited previously, the facilities are somewhat dated, to say the least. And we're quite grateful, really, to Avanti, who obviously have taken over the franchise. And they're at the moment showing their willingness to put some investment into the station, certainly in the short term. But longer term, obviously, we've got work to do on that. And again, that's where the MDC will link into as well. Indeed, we've got, obviously, you may have seen the plans for Weir Mill. And of course, that the work at Weir Mill will support, again, people using the station. It'll provide facilities there, I suppose, to then go on and access journeys at the station. But of course, the immediate facilities at the station do need some investment. And as people might know as well, we've got our lovely underpass that links, which I'll touch on shortly. We've got the underpass at the station, which links the Stockport Exchange side, or the town centre side, shall we say, into the Edgeley side. And it's not the most inviting at the moment, to say the least. And that, again, does need some investment, and Avanti, hopefully, are going to support us in the short term. But it links into the longer term aspirations for the station as well, in that we need something that's much more, that's fit for the here and now and going forward. So we think as well, obviously, that the station, as I've said, can provide real opportunities. And as I've said before, we want to try and use public transport infrastructure to use stations as a means for developing places. So we think that with the station, particularly on the Edgeley side, we can use that as an opportunity to deliver new homes, workspaces and the like. And as I've said as well, it's to unlock rail capacity. As well. I had a conversation with Cheshire East and Derbyshire colleagues only sort of a week or two ago about they wanting to deliver homes in Poynton and around that area. And of course, in order to support that and to ensure we don't get congestion on our roads, rail is going to be a key part of that. And again, that's where the station does link in. Of course, we want to a new station at the very heart of town centre west of the MDC. We want it to be a statement really of Stockport, of the here and now and the future. Stockport, as in my view, and this is something, I mean, I'm Stockport born and bred, and for years I felt that Stockport hasn't punched its weight. And now finally we are beginning to get there. Indeed, the station's a key example. The fact that you can get to London within 2 hours. We've got the airport on our doorstep. We've got a major motorway network. We've got the key components there, but we need to do more with them. And again, that's what the station represents, or our prospectus here represents. It represents that ambition, but also the fact we've got that. I guess that reputation for delivery that will hopefully bring confidence to show people that this is really achievable. And obviously, as I say, to become a gateway, not just I guess for the north, I suppose, but for Greater Manchester as well. And of course, we see ourselves as being a key part of trying to bring investment not just into Stockport but into Greater Manchester as a whole as well. So I guess our vision really, you can see there we've done a bit of I won't say a busman's holiday, but you can see there in terms of the inspiration really behind what we're looking to do. We've taken inspiration from abroad, from Central Europe and the like, and those sort of examples there link into ultimately what we want to try and achieve for the station going forward. So it's made up of a series of phases. It's 5 phases all in all, but this is phase 0. It goes from 0 to 4. So that's where we are at the moment. So as people will know, we've got a nice, fairly nice new car park there, to say the least, and that's supporting Stockport Exchange. And then we've got Stockport Exchange phase 1, which has been done for a little while now. Obviously, we've got wider schemes that we've got going on at the moment in terms of trying to reduce traffic around the area. So that's where we are at the moment. But going forward, this is where we hope to go. So this is over sort of from now to the next 3 years. So these are sort of the immediate things that we want to achieve as part of the growth plan, and we are on track to achieve. 2 in particular are quite big logistical challenges, really. One of which I will mention in particular is the Greek Street roundabout bridge. Now that's something that Network Rail are onto at the moment, and that's something that again will support again addressing those pinch points that we've got there. So that's something in particular that we're working on. But not only that, we want to improve the pedestrian links as well between the new bus station or the interchange that's coming in, get those better links there again to support multimodal travel. That's something that we want to support, and by having those better links between, I guess, where the bus station is at the moment, where the interchange is going, and the station. Again, if people have used the station and gone from the bus station to the train station, you'll realise that the link there isn't particularly appetising, but again, through the work that we've got with the interchange at the moment and through this plan, we will certainly be looking to improve those. You'll see there at the bottom there too, on the bottom left there, you'll see that the plan we've got for the interchange to have a brand new green space, a new park for the town centre, the first park within the area for many years, to say the least. A brand new green space, and that will obviously link into the train station. So that's where we are at the moment in terms of improving connectivity in the immediate, it's a sort of medium term, and that's all work that's now ongoing. And then when we go forward, this is within the next sort of 4 to 6 years, I suppose. you would have seen that I mentioned about the underpass. What we want to do is we want to create a brand new overbridge, station overbridge, which again will be far more fitting for this, for where we are now. And also it will begin to open up better access into Edgeley. Now, I'm from Edgeley. I've sort of lived here pretty much, aside from the odd year here and there elsewhere. I'm sort of Edgeley born and bred, and certainly going through that underpass, you know, it certainly isn't the most pleasurable of things, to say the least. But not only that, it's potentially restricting what we can do on the Edgeley side, and by having that overbridge there will not only improve access, but again, it will hopefully support us doing some further work or beginning to do more work on the Edgeley side to develop the potential there. You'll see there again, we're looking to increase capacity through reconfiguring the platform layouts, and of course we've got our Metrolink extension as well, which we're hoping to deliver. I should hopefully have some further news on that very, very soon, but the work is ongoing on that, and obviously, you know, we need to consider whether the station will support getting access into Metrolink. So we've got that within our phase 2 as well. So that's phase 2, and then when we go on to phase 3, you'll see this is where we begin to look at the Edgeley side a bit more. So we want to give the station a higher profile on the Edgeley side. We want to try and do what we've done on the Townsend to Stockport Exchange side, to try and replicate that a bit more on the Edgeley side. And we think we've got opportunities there to develop commercial activities there to support growth in employment. And of course, we the fact that on the Edgeley side, you've got sort of access from the motorway there. We feel we can do some work on there as well to support access from the M60. And not only that, we obviously, as part of our transport plans, if you've seen, for example, the Transport 2040 strategy and our local implementation plan, or our draft local implementation plan, we've got an ambition to have that link from Stockport to the airport to potentially use tram train. So again, while I'm touching on the fact that I do want HS2 connectivity to come into Stockport, if we can get that tram train capability from Stockport to the airport to support access in HS2, that will somewhat be a halfway house. But for me, I do still believe that we need that connectivity, that HS2 connectivity, to come through to Stockport, or to certainly have that cross compatibility connectivity there if we can get it. But certainly we want to try and get tram train into the station, and at the very least that can support access to the airport. So that's in the third phase, and then I guess finally we've got the Edgeley phase. So obviously this is sort of very long term, really, over 10 to 12 years from now. But again, it links into the fact that we want to. Like I said, I feel Edgeley's got so much potential at the moment. When we're looking at Stockport, I suppose, and I guess you can think about it in a Greater Manchester context, but particularly within Stockport, Edgeley's one of the sort of few places at the moment where particularly for people like me, for first-time buyers, you can still get fairly good value for money, and there's a lot of potential in Edgeley, and we feel that like I say, we can do something with that, and support its regeneration. So again, with the Edgeley phase, we want to create the station square, have further commercial development on the Edgeley side as well, like I say, to sort of try and replicate somewhat what's gone on Stockport Exchange on the other side. So that's pretty much the summary of it there. It's not small beer, I guess, that we're asking for, and as Sarah said, it's around £500 million really, all in all. But I think what each phase shows, and obviously as I've hinted at earlier, to address the issues at Stockport Station will be of fundamental importance to not just to Greater Manchester, to the centre of Manchester, to Salford, to deliver their aspirations, but also to deliver the aspirations for other boroughs as well. So we think we've got a lot of we can get a lot of buy-in really from a lot of different partners, and that's one of the reasons why we've got this growth prospectus and trying to use the MDC. We feel we can bring everyone together to really showcase, what the potential of Stockport Station, but also what needs to be achieved there can address a number of different asks that others are making. So you'll see there we've got our asks. So we want to try and use the MDC as a way of getting, I guess, some new powers, really, to test the evolution even more, to see whether we can get those new powers to deliver things for Stockport. And I guess, looking at, Greater Manchester, because it would benefit Greater Manchester more widely, see whether we can test the evolution and deliver things in a quicker time scale. So that's what we're hoping to use the MDC for, and I guess as well with Sir Bob Kerslake being the MDC chair, it brings it that gravitas, that expertise, that experience, and through using the MDC we can raise the importance of this scheme, not just I guess for Greater Manchester and the North, but who knows, demonstrate the importance of the scheme on a national level. And you'll see there we've obviously got our rail industry asks there as well. And that links in really to our next steps as well. So what we're looking to do in particular, I'll probably focus on the second point, which some of you I think will be particularly interested in, is we want to have a round table event to talk about the growth prospectus for the station, to bring all those key partners together. And I'm sure there'll be some of you in this room this morning who might want to get involved with that. So, that's something that I think I'd be particularly interested to hear, whether you wanted to come along to any event going forward. But our 5 in particular there are, a Network Rail, Avanti and the DFT, etc., and Transport for the North, to bring all those together into one room effectively. Because obviously that's one of the difficulties I've sort of come across in my time with this portfolio. It's, and I guess that's it with the rail industry in general. It's who to talk to in order to try and make progress, and at times you don't realize you're talking to the wrong person or the wrong partner and so on. And I think with this would bring everyone together in that one room, and then from there then at least we can begin to be working on the same page, and I guess hopefully we can achieve all our objectives within this one project. And I guess if you're looking for a particular example, there's the York Central model, if you want to have a look at that, which is pretty much along the lines of what we would like to do. So again, with the York Central model, that's got Network Rail involved, but that's also looking at using the station to support delivering residential and the like. So the York Central model in particular is something that we've looked at. And that might be something that you want to look at maybe for your own benefit, I guess, just to add a bit more context to this. So that's something that we're looking at, again, just trying to bring different partners together into the same place. And that's sort of it really, Chair Sarah. Thanks for that. Any questions, etc., I'm here, and thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing that, David. It's a massive piece of work, and I'm sure everyone will look forward to seeing that, go through the stages and come to fruition. So our next panel discussion will discuss transport projects and policy in Greater Manchester and how that ties in with connectivity across the wider Northwest. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Nicola Kane, Head of Strategic Planning, Insight and Innovation at Transport for Greater Manchester, Harbinder Birdy, Senior Partner at Hawkins Brown, Brian Sant, Executive Director at BWB Consulting, and Councillor David Meller from Stockport Council. If our speakers could activate their cameras and mics, please. And do remember to our audience to submit any questions to our panel through the Q&A button, and we'll hopefully get through as many of those as we can throughout the next 45 minutes. Welcome, everyone.
Hello. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Hi.
I think we're possibly still waiting for Nicola. So we can crack on if that's okay, and hopefully she will join us when she can. But yeah, quite keen to crack on because we've only got 40 minutes left of this panel. So okay, by way of introduction to the rest of our panelists, I'd like to ask each of you to give a brief overview of some of the projects you're working on in Greater Manchester and beyond. Harbinder from Hawkins Brown, you guys have designed the new Irwell Bridge linking New Bailey and Salford with Manchester St John's, among other schemes. Would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. No, we've been in Manchester oh God, over sort of 6 years, and I actually studied architecture in the city. So I've seen it sort of change from the days when I used to work in the hacienda many, many years ago. And it really has sort of evolved. And I want to talk about two projects. One is Stafford Station Gateway, which is a scheme that we're working with Stafford Council and London Continental Railway, and that is a 28-hectare site next to the station. And that one there is very much where the local council and Network Rail are working in joint venture to look at development opportunities in and around their transportation node. So I think that is one area of work that we see potentially growing throughout the UK, but particularly in the north, where you have potential for development sites, and how does the station and the infrastructure sort of respond. But a scheme closer to home is Pollard Street, which is working with a developer, private sector developer, General Projects, which is actually in New Islington. And there what we're actually creating is a new workplace for the future, which is sort of everything from startup companies, SMEs, to established companies. But there we're actually having to work with a developer to integrate transport TFGM's tram extension into the site. So that's where the private sector needs the infrastructure to be able to support the development. And there we're actually making it car free. We've got space for 550 bikes. And the emphasis there is very much on public realm. So we see Pollard Street being one of the sort of, I suppose one of the sort of potential new developments that really does embrace the infrastructure that the city requires.
Brilliant, thanks Harbinder. Graham Sant from BWB, what's in your intro at the moment? I know you've been involved in over your sort of career in HS2 proposals as well and strategies, so perhaps you could give us an overview.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So I'm fairly new to BWB. I've only joined 3 months ago. I joined BWB to bring myself from a career perspective back to Manchester, which is where I'm from. I've delivered hybrid bill for Country North on phase 1 of HS2, and I was actively involved in hybrid bill for phase 2B as well for the Birmingham to Chesterfield route. So I'm really interested to see how HS2 is going to influence the north, particularly around the Manchester area. Excited to hear what Weston Williamson had to say about the through transit of HS2 through an underground station concept as well. I was actively involved in the A556 development as well, just south of Manchester, which has obviously been an enabler between the M50 and the M56 and the M6. And having arrived in BWB, there's some really exciting things going on at the moment, particularly with the use of technology through the sponsors for today's event, which is D2, around public engagement, GIS and interactive mapping platforms that really get to the heart of public consultations so we can hear what people think about new developments, and we can take those consultations on board and develop well-rounded plans that actually meet the requirements of society rather than the bureaucracy that sometimes approves them. And then developments that we're currently working on in and around the city, primarily focused on private developments. And this is why the infrastructure of the north is going to be so critical for developing those arterial routes for the private developers. So things like Port Salford, Trafford Waters, Salford Red Stadium Retail Park, work that we're doing at Seedley Regeneration around affordable homes in the Salford region, are the kind of things that BWB are developing at the moment.
Okay, brilliant, thanks Graham. Hi Nicola, welcome to you. You might have to unmute yourself actually.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened there. I got thrown out of the platform.
No, glad to have you with us. Welcome to you. Perhaps I'll ask you a question next. So perhaps you would like to give us a bit of sort of in a nutshell of Transport for Greater Manchester's latest vision for the city region. What are your key objectives in the strategy and how are you going about implementing them? What's next?
Okay, it's a big question. We've been very busy kind of gearing up to publish a refreshed version of our 2040 transport strategy, which will be launched alongside the GMSF consultation in December. And that's supported by a final version of our 5-year delivery plan. So clarifying the things that we're going to be working on, looking to get funding looking to deliver over the next 5 years. So that's going to be fantastic just to have that out in the public domain, and sort of real clear plan ahead of the work that we're going to be prioritising and hopefully collaborating on with our district partners, national agencies, and the private sector as well. So the vision really is, a very big picture, is about how we deliver, how we tackle the climate emergency, how we reduce carbon emissions from transport, and how we move towards a kind of more sustainable transport system. So we have a vision for 50% of all trips to be made by sustainable modes, by walking, cycling and public transport. That's up from less than 40% at the moment, and against a backdrop of significant growth over the next 20 years. So that's actually a pretty big ask, and is going to require a real combination of the right land use planning, so people have everyday services closer to where they live that they can walk and cycle more easily to, the right investment in public transport capacity and connections, and ongoing investment in things like walking and cycling. We've obviously got a huge programme of investment underway in our B network, and we see that continuing over the next, certainly the next 10 years and probably beyond.
Brilliant, thanks, Nicola. Yes, I know it's a very broad question. It's useful to sort of start with it as a sort of a starting point for the rest of our conversation. Councillor David Meller, we've heard from you about Stockport's exciting station vision. More generally, how would you say COVID has impacted transport and travel and commuting in and around Greater Manchester in terms of sort of what people want, their sort of changing needs, and how is this likely to play out in the coming months and years? You mentioned in your presentation the importance of linking Stockport into the wider HS2 network as well, either directly or through a Metrolink extension, which has been proposed. Perhaps you could talk about that.
So I think in terms of COVID, I think obviously we've seen the expansion and the desire for people to pursue active travel more, obviously with what Nicola has said earlier on. I mean, and that's something that we're pressing on with, even more in terms of delivering those schemes. I think my concern has been certainly over the COVID period. We've obviously seen quite a dip in public transport use, and obviously I think what we've got to do now is we've got to, I guess, give people the confidence again to use public transport. I mean, we've seen a rise, for example, in people buying things like used cars and the like in order to get by, and that's something that we've got to address going forward. And I think in order to do that, we've got to make public transport attractive for people to use, and it's got to be relevant to people's lives. So again, Stockport has gone without Metrolink now for quite some time, compared to other boroughs. And I think by getting Metrolink into Stockport, it gives people that convenience and the opportunity to use public transport where they feel they can't at the moment. Again, with things like with bus franchising or potential bus franchising, I should caveat. I think by having a bus network that I think people can rely on will be something that is key. And I think certainly with what we've been going through with COVID at the moment, I think by having a much more reliable bus network, a bus network that serves people's needs more, that people, I guess, feel they've got a sense of ownership over. I think, again, that there's a heightened desire for that as well. We're seeing at the moment, bus routes, across Greater Manchester, potentially under a lot of strain financially. And there's a risk that we could lose the routes that people want going forward. And I think by having bus reform, we can try and achieve, those routes and get those routes that people want. And I think there's a real desire for that too. I think in terms of the HS2 side of things, this is something, like I say, whenever I get a platform, I'll always wax lyrical and make the same points on this, really. I don't want Stockport to miss out on HS2 because, or the benefits of HS2, because as I've said earlier, I think it could potentially undermine everything that we're doing within the town centre. We want people not to have to resort to using their cars and the like to make those long distance journeys. We want people to be using public transport, and certainly with HS2, by having that connectivity in some form into Stockport, it will support what we're doing with the MDC, you know, imagine being able to, I don't know, to live in the centre of Stockport, to then be able to jump on a train which has got potential for HS2 connectivity, and then to get to London, you know, within what, an hour or so, or however long it takes. You know, the benefits of having HS2 linking into Stockport and linking into the MDC are absolutely massive. And as I've said, those benefits would be felt throughout Greater Manchester, in my view. So I think, yeah. So I think really, just to say with how COVID's impacted, I think really people want a transport or public transport network that is more relevant to them, that is easily accessible. And I think it's more incumbent on us than ever to deliver that, in order to not only gain people's trust again into using public transport, but by having something that is easily accessible and easy to use. I think that will begin to, you know, not only address the fall that we've seen, but get more people out of cars onto public transport, and then address the wider, you know, the wider issues we've got to grapple with, like climate change, clean air, of course, as well, which is something that we're obviously grappling with too. So yeah, that's sort of my view, I think.
Absolutely. Thanks, David. Actually, we've had a question from the audience, Marcel Ridyard. Great to hear about this tram train concept. Could this enable a more frequent service on the existing suburban rail network into Piccadilly, in Chapel and Levenshulme, etc.? I think that's a question for you, David. Do you want to tackle that one before we go to the rest of the panel?
Well, I can try. I can't say I'm fully up to date, or I know all the specs and everything else in terms of how it all works. But I know we've obviously got these Pathfinder proposals that are within the 2040 strategy. I think certainly we'll see how they go. But I think that's the potential, isn't it, with tram train? I mean, if we sort of almost, you know, it's two birds with one stone, isn't it? Because we're not only, I guess, supporting rail there, if we can get tram services to run as well on the same lines, you know, we're just boosting the capacity and boosting the potential really for people to access the public transport network going forward. So I think absolutely. I think we just need to obviously see what happens with these Pathfinders, but certainly the potential's massive, and of course within the 2040 strategy, that's sort of firmly embedded in there. I mean, what I'm particularly keen for us to try and do longer term is, you know, we've got areas like Marple, for example, which you know within the borough are quite, I guess, out on a limb really, and they see themselves as distinct communities, and I think certainly accessing the centre of Stockport from Marple, unless you can drive, is tricky. So again, by sort of squaring the circle really with tram train, you know, the possibilities and the potential are absolutely massive. So I'm sure Nicola can maybe add a bit more on that in terms of the logistics of it all and the like. But it's certainly something I'm passionate about, and I really hope that the Pathfinders work as well as I hope they will, because I think, like I say, it will unlock a heck of a lot for the region.
Mm-hmm. Nicola, did you want to come in on that at all?
Well, I guess just to say that, you know, we kind of see tram train as the next big phase of development of the Metrolink network. So making good use of the infrastructure we already have. You know, we're pretty blessed in Greater Manchester having a good network of rail infrastructure, and we've seen the benefit where we've converted some former heavy rail lines to Metrolink already on our existing network, and what benefits that brings in terms of having a locally accountable system, high frequency services through the day, through the weekends, as well as providing good commuter services. And we think we can bring some of those benefits to some of those rail lines, particularly the ones that are perhaps less well used, perhaps offering less good customer service for local residents. But we've got quite a few hurdles to jump over first. The technology has already been tested in Sheffield, so that helps, but there's going to be quite a long period of proving the concept in Greater Manchester, proving it on our network where we have high platforms, so that helps. That makes it a little bit easier than it was in Sheffield. But we've got to go through that testing process, designing the vehicles, getting them out on the network on the Pathfinders, and then the potential, I think, is enormous if we can prove the concept and get the investment to make that vision come to life.
Brilliant, thanks, Nicola. I was going to go on and ask Harbinder about sort of other aspects of travel, actually, but I think there's one bit on this rail and tram piece that we haven't addressed. And Graham, I wonder whether you would like to comment on the potential challenges here. What are the barriers? You know, so there's been a lot of vision, a lot of sort of wishes, you know, set out here in the first 15 minutes of our panel. What are the practical challenges and barriers to implementing this? You know, funding, policy, etc.
I think they're age-old challenges that we have throughout the whole of the UK. They're not just prescriptive to the north. At the end of the day, it takes us so long to raise budget cases and funding envelopes. It seems so overtly complex and time-consuming for us to be able to put together budget case for lobbying with the FT or lobbying with government so that we can get approval and the funds are brought forward to actually develop the projects. And that's way before we even get into planning consultations or DCO type arrangements. So I think the challenge is doing business in this country is long and drawn out, and we have to wait for exorbitant periods of time to get much needed schemes on the ground. And very often by the time they actually get to market, new technologies have been formed, and actually we're probably delivering old systems that should have been delivered much earlier.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Graham. I think there's more we can discuss there later on, but we've already managed to address sort of rail, tram, bus, roads in our first 15 minutes. I'd like to talk about this active travel concept, which is such a talking point at the moment during the pandemic. And I think certainly with all transport strategies, as they're implemented, future-proofing them is going to be key. So Harbinder, how can trends such as active travel and the 20-minute city, etc., be adopted to create more pleasant and streamlined movements around Greater Manchester? What would you like to see?
I think it's a real challenge. I mean, I'm just looking back at what happened in sort of like March when there was the first lockdown, and then suddenly all the councils around the country were essentially putting like traffic cones everywhere on the street, trying to encourage, basically how big is a footpath, in terms of this 2 meter sort of spacing, and then you've got the cycle, etc. And it was great because it was sort of springtime. And what happened was that you could not buy a bike. And I think now the waiting time for a Brompton is 1 year. So you go to a bike shop like Hen's Teeth, you can't get them, So it's bizarre that there's a secondhand car market and then there's bikes. You just can't get the two things, So, and I really feel for like council, because they're saying, actually, we're about to create this new piece of public realm, and is it going to work? Is it going to work in a year's time, etc.? Are people still going to be cycling? Are people still going to be? And actually, in a way, I think you have to do something, and actually, I was talking to Katie, who's our partner that heads up the Studio North, and she lives in Altrincham, and she walks her son to school out of principle because she doesn't own a car. And actually what she was saying was that the amount of cars that are piling up in the morning where they drop off their kids at that morning peak, and then there's that 3:30 peak, and it happens everywhere, And actually, I think part of it is actually, we were designing a school in London, and the head teacher said, can you design the public realm so that it's impossible for a Range Rover to park within 60 meters of the front gate? And the point is that if you're dropping your child off every morning from the age of 3 to 12, and what you're saying to them is never walk to school, what will that child grow up to be like, in terms of like how they see the streets? So I do think that it starts at a very, very early age. And actually, we are sort of responsible. And if you look at what's happening in Manchester, is that there's lots of development in the centre. So the young want to live in the centre. I remember when I lived in Manchester, I lived in Wally Range, in Didsbury, in Fallowfield, and I would cycle in. But the young now actually want to live right in the centre, and they want to walk around. And I think what will happen is eventually they will then eventually move out. But what they really want to do is have their satellite villages that they exist in. But then what they really want to do is actually come into town. And I think what we really need to do is really think about how people are going to be moving through the city, and how do we create streets to enable them to do that without the car. And I think that is a fundamental driver. So they use a tram, they use the train, and then they use a cycle, and then they walk. And they walk as much. And actually walking is great. And if you have great streets with great lighting, with active frontages, people will walk. people will walk. And that's where the private sector are going to get a real benefit, because they're getting footfall. They're getting footfall past their development, and that activates the streets. And so I think it's complex, but actually physiologically and mentally, we are designed as a species to walk. We are not designed to be in a car, but car manufacturers think otherwise. So I think that's the battle that we have.
Thanks, Harbinder. I think that's some really interesting points there. Nicola, I'd like to ask you about this same topic, because of course, this updated transport plan that you guys are doing along with Manchester City Council and Salford City Council, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a strategy for 90% of all trips into the city centre to be made on foot, by cycle, or by public transport by 2040 at the least. What's the sort of component for the walking and cycling bit? What's your vision for that? And I think this strategy went out for consultation in September. What are the responses you're having so far from the public?
Yes, we went out for 8 weeks at the beginning of September. That's just closed. We've had about 2,500 responses, which is pretty good going in the middle of a pandemic when quite a lot of people aren't actually travelling into the city centre. So we were quite pleased with that. We're still churning through those, so I can't give you much detail yet on what people were telling us. But we've had a lot of really positive feedback. I think people can see that the city centre is growing fast, it's growing more dense, and it's growing outwards, and that we can't kind of sustain that growth based on lots of people travelling by car into the city centre. That just won't work. And if we want to create an environment that is good to visit, that is good to live in, it's good to spend time in, we need to rethink our streets and how we use them. So it is a pretty bold strategy, but we're already sort of well on the way to that. So we've already got pretty high mode share for public transport, for walking and cycling into the city centre. So we're kind of going with the trend. But the opportunity that now is to give more space, particularly to walking and cycling, and to make sure we've got the right level of capacity on our public transport networks. So I think the reaction has been positive, but there will obviously need to be difficult decisions about how you use the the limited road space that we have, what you do about car parking, and the intention over time again is to make better use of some of the land that's currently dedicated to parking, which could be used for all sorts of other purposes, perhaps more green space, more development, and so on. So we're hoping that once we've gone through the consultation responses, that people will be supportive of the principles, and then there's a lot more detail to work through, sort of street by street, square by square, how we make that vision come to fruition.
Absolutely, and as we heard in the first panel, it often will sort of require a rethink of the spatial planning and the infrastructure that's provided to support that cycling and walking. Do you know, within the 90%, do you have a figure at the moment for then what percentage would be walking and cycling, and what would be public transport, or is that not quite set out yet?
We have worked that through. I haven't got the numbers in my head, unfortunately, but the idea is once you're in the city centre, then walking in particular will be the dominant mode. So giving more space to pedestrians to make them feel safe, comfortable. The city centre is actually pretty compact, but at the moment there are lots of barriers when you walk around the city centre, lots of roads that can be quite difficult to cross, quite a lot of congestion, poor air quality. So it's about creating that environment where walking is just the obvious choice. Why would you do anything else? We're also looking at introducing a bike hire scheme. So again, that would give people another way of getting around the city centre. If they're, say, arriving on a train, Piccadilly, that they would be able to cycle across the city centre if they didn't want to walk. We're testing e-scooters in Salford. And again, that could be another mode that could, again, help to make it easier for people to connect within the city centre. And then it's looking at the role of all the different radial corridors coming into the centre and working out which ones we want to really prioritise public transport, which ones we want to really prioritise walking and cycling, and of course how we ensure that all the businesses can be properly serviced. So getting the freight and logistic plans will also be a really important component of that. So it's thinking about the network as a whole, and then thinking about how that plays out kind of at individual street levels, and having that full strategy in your mind as you're designing for individual streets and squares within the city centre.
Sure. Yeah, big piece of work then. Graham, you wanted to come in, I think, didn't you, on a point?
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment both Nicola and David. You know, for years we've been redeveloping urban business districts and residential areas, and the focus has been how much we can actually get within a specific space, or what financial return we can get on the development. And what I'm seeing in the Manchester vision, and what David mentioned about the overbuild at Stockport station, he's focused on more greening. And Nicola mentioned on getting people cycling and walking. Well, the attractiveness for people to undertake those activities isn't just about their physical persona or their well-being or the availability to do so. It's very much about the environment and the developed environment that they're in. And we need to be more aspirational. Stockport and Manchester needs to be far more aspirational than it is. You know, why can't we be the Bosco Verticale of Manchester, similar to they've got in Milan? You know, why can't we have more greening of the infrastructure? We spend a lot of time designing and implementing concrete and steel structures. And while there's a lot of architectural prowess around the materials that we use, I'd like to see a bigger move towards more greening and more enticing environments for people. And that way, that will promote the pedestrian routing and cycling even more so than we've got currently.
Absolutely, and I think that's a sort of often overlooked point, isn't it? Sort of when thinking about sort of transport infrastructure with the utilitarian kind of view. So yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. David, I'd like to get your view on this. Stockport, you know, a lot of your plans are about sort of rail and tram, and as you're saying, you're kind of separated from Manchester city centre, for example, by the M60. So what role is active travel going to play in your plans, and in better connecting Stockport with the rest of Greater Manchester without relying on cars and trains?
That's a really good question. I mean, when it came to, I guess, the first lot of active, for example, the Emergency Active Travel Fund, the first tranche there, we sort of, my aspiration really was to see if we could create a corridor from the centre of Stockport that would link eventually into the centre of Manchester. The problem is we've got something called the A6 and the capacity on that, coupled with the bus network and so on there, just made it very, very difficult. So I think the tricky thing is we're sort of, I guess, somewhat constrained not only by road space but a bit by geography, but we can't necessarily let that get in the way. So I think in terms of supporting more active travel into the regional centre, I guess that does start really with better rail and tram and so on, because, for example, if we can get bike hire schemes, you know, we can encourage that multimodal travel, you know, to use the rail and then to use the bike, and then vice versa. So I think you know, there's a role. I think for me, I see it all interconnected into one another in terms of supporting walking and cycling into the regional centre. I mean, we have got sort of you know, I guess age-old schemes, I suppose, like the Transpennine Trail, which we're always looking to put investment into, which will support better access into areas like Didsbury and I guess further afield that way. I mean, just to touch on really a point that I guess was made earlier about the benefits of walking and cycling, and I guess being more aspirational. I mean, I would, my heart says I want to jump into this, completely reconfigure all the roads, do this, that, and the other. The problem is a lot of people would, shall we say, crucify me if I did that, because I think at the moment what we've got really is, I think some people in particular, and as we've seen down in London with a lot of the emergency measures, I think people are still struggling. The more sceptical are still struggling to see the benefit of all this work, and I think that's something that I need to keep doing. I guess with my role on the council, I need to keep putting forward those benefits to everyone, because ultimately, if we can get more people walking and cycling, that will benefit drivers because it takes congestion off the roads. It will benefit those in local communities because it will make the roads safer. You know, one of the things that we're, you know, some of the schemes of work we've got in Stockport at the moment relate to creating active neighbourhoods. And one of the big things with that is to stop rat running. People hate rat running. If you speak to everyone, they'll say, I want to stop all these cars by coming down my residential street to avoid a busy road. Now, through doing active neighbourhoods and work like that, we can stop that. But the minute you start putting planters on people's roads and you don't consult them properly, that's when all hell can potentially break loose. So I think a lot of this is down to consultation and extolling the benefit, the idea that this is going to benefit everyone. It's not just going to benefit, people sort of got this stereotypical view that it's only going to benefit lycra-clad middle-aged men, but it won't. It will benefit as whole communities really. So I just wanted to get that point in. But certainly in terms of cycling from Stockport into the regional centre, I'll be honest, it's something that we've got to continue to try and crack. I mean, like I say, if we can, I think if we can have better public transport, like I say, get rail, get tram, that will then enable us to, I guess, encourage multimodal travel. But by taking congestion off the roads, will it allow us to allocate more road space on roads like the A6 to then enable access into the regional centre for cycling? I would hope so, but it's a tricky one, Sarah. I must be honest, and it's one that is fraught not only with logistical difficulties but many political ones as well.
Well, yeah, I'm sure. Well, I must confess an interest there, because I cycle in from Stockport to the centre along the A6, and it can be pretty hairy.
Hats off to you, Sarah, for doing that. Yeah, very. I mean, this is it. I mean, I'm going to hold my hands up. I mean, I am a big advocate of walking and cycling, but I'm going to be absolutely honest and embarrass myself. I can't even ride a bloody bike. So I'm actually waiting for someone from TFGM to offer me some lessons. So and that's why walk ride groups and groups like that. I try and ensure we've got good relationships with the walk ride groups. At times we can't do everything that is asked, and at times we're not going to go the whole way. But certainly, it's important that it has. I think it's important that these schemes, and like I say, with walk ride groups, with commuter cyclists like you, pitch in and tell us really, the things that we need to do, and we will certainly do what we can to address the obstacles that are there. But hats off to you, Sarah. It's
Absolutely. No, thanks for that, David. And we've got 10 minutes or so left. So if any of the audience have any questions they'd like to put to the panel, now is your moment, and we'll try and get to them. Harbinder, a question that's not related to what we've just been talking about, active travel and things, but it's about the role of stations and other transport infrastructure, transport property buildings in the years ahead. We've talked about sort of multimodal transport, but what about sort of multi-use buildings within transport? This could relate to the footfall idea that we were talking about earlier. What do you think are the opportunities there?
I think there's lots, and I think, and currently at the moment, I know that lots of I suppose rail asset landlords are sort of scratching their head thinking, how should stations be? I mean, we were designing stations pre-COVID, and then COVID hit, and the client said, actually, do I need to make it bigger? Because there isn't that morning evening peak of the commuters going to London. So, there was a capacity issue, and now is there going to be? So actually, a lot of landlords are saying, the rail operators are saying, actually, how big does our station really need to be? And if what we don't need to do is put some more platforms in there and make the ticket hall bigger, we've still got the space. So actually, what do we turn that into? And actually, if we're thinking now about people maybe, if post-COVID, what's going to happen? Well, people generally realize that work from home, you're not dossing, right? So the boss trusts you. And what's really happening is actually the young crave to be in the office because they learn lots. And actually people that are a bit older are quite happy because they might be living sort of like 8 or 9 miles away from the office to actually just come in twice a week. So actually what we see is that in January, every office is going to be redesigned for that perfect blend of like lots of meetings, but a bit of desk space as well. Now, what does that mean for those transport nodes that you're getting onto to actually get into work? What is it that you want there where actually you don't have to get there at 9 in the morning? It's not a 9 till 6 anymore. You're really coming into the office to actually meet other people, to have this proper interaction. So the managers now have to be really efficient at managing people. That means that there's going to be lots of management courses going everywhere because that's really hard to do. So what's going to happen is that in that time where you've got an hour here, an hour there, when you're at that infrastructure node, what makes you get out of your place? Because you don't really want to be sitting at home all the time, because as a species, we really want to be in a space where there's lots of lovely people around us most of the time. That's what we really want. So I think retail, I think workspace, I think places to meet, are going to be key. But we're living now in villages, and actually, I think the infrastructure, that our station is going to be a fundamental part of the village, where it's not going to be a morning, evening peak. You're going to rely on that throughout the day, and different parts of the community are going to be using that.
Thanks, Harbinder. I think Graham put up his hand there, I think.
Yeah, I totally support what Harbinder's saying there. It's interesting people's use of time through the COVID situation and the population on transport during the pandemic. It will be over at some point, and yes, it will change people's trends, the way they travel and why they travel. The developments that David and Cllr have alluded to around the stations as being hubs, I think is absolutely spot on. I think particularly we need to take on board the opportunity to develop real community hubs at those locations. So, the high street has been suffering from downturns in retail due to internet shopping. That's been accelerated through COVID. There is no going back on that. People will still go to certain stores to buy certain things, but ultimately it's so easy now to buy things online. I think these station developments, not only will they become community hubs, they may be retail outlets for you to collect goods that you've ordered during transit, as opposed for people trying to deliver them to your home when you're not there, for example. But also those station hubs will become leisure destinations as well, for people who at the end of their commute are meeting with friends, meeting with families to celebrate, so they don't have to do multiple journeys. It will all be consecutive. And it will be about making the best use of the optimum time that you have available, so your work-life balance is expressed in the right way, rather than rushing here, there and everywhere to get different modes of transport to go to different destinations.
That's really interesting. Thanks, Graham. David, you put up your hand, I think.
Yeah, I think Graham hit the nail on the head there, because I think that's something that we're absolutely trying to do in Stockport, and we're pushing on at a pace, really. I mean, we've seen with Mersey, for example, that and general sort of footfall for retail has been going down for many years, and I think certainly COVID is exacerbating that. And I think what we're doing now in Stockport is to try and create these community hubs to make Stockport not just a destination or an area just where you come and buy a bit of shopping, but to bring people into the area to do other things. I mean, one of the proposals we've got at the moment is to temporarily bring library services right into the town centre. Again, to make it not only to make it a hub for people, but obviously it will bring footfall in, which will support the retail that's there as well. So I completely and utterly agree with what Graham's saying there. I think again, just to come back, I guess it's a bit like the walking and cycling side of things. When you try and explain that to people, to I guess your ordinary bloke or whatever on the street, they'll say, "Oh, Stockport's still dying out. There's no shops there," and I think you try and explain that to people, saying, "Well, the way things have been done over the last 20 odd years or so is going, and it's going quickly. Conventional retail, as you see it, within town centres is going, and I think there's certainly still a bit of work, I guess, for me to do, and I guess for everyone to do, to get that message across to people. In the old way of going to a town centre to do all your shopping and whatnot, obviously there'll still be, I guess, an element of that, but to solely rely on a town centre just to be a retail hub has gone, and I think certainly I have to keep. I guess it's going to be a bit of a slog to bring people on that journey, really, to get people to understand that. I mean, we are getting there, but for many people, people still see town centre equals shops. No shops equals it's derelict. It's not got a future. And I think we need to keep putting that argument across that things are changing.
Yeah. Nicola's been nodding. I actually had a final question for you, Nicola, so perhaps you could answer this one as well afterwards,
okay, yeah.
Which is sort of, in a nutshell, do you envisage in the future transport for Greater Manchester sort of becoming a sort of TfL, Transport for London type body, really streamlining ticketing and the different modes of transport to really influence travel trends across the whole city region. But first, if you wanted to come in on what David was saying.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what everyone said about stations, and we've seen the potential for rail stations to be much more focused on the needs of the community. We put in a proposal a few years ago to government to take over management of rail stations because we felt that would enable them to be more locally accountable and to deliver services that local people needed, and you could adapt that over time. And I think probably what the last few months has taught us that we do need our infrastructure to be flexible and adaptable, and we need to design it in such a way that it can flex over time as people's needs change. And I think we talked about some of the community facilities, but we also see these hubs as playing a much more multimodal function in future. So there's been quite a strong emphasis on park and ride in the past, and that's fine. But we need to think beyond park and ride. We need to think of other ways that people can access stations. Again, it could be e-scooters, it could be walking and cycling, providing better electric vehicle charging infrastructure, as we've talked about already, pickup points for parcels, cargo bikes. There's a whole range of different facilities that enable those hubs to become sort of truly multimodal. And we want to do more work on that over the sort of coming months and years to sort of think about what those hubs could look like in different sorts of locations. So coming back to your question, I mean, Andy Burnham's talked a lot about his vision of a London-style transport system, because I think that's a transport system that people, most people have visited London, they sort of can envisage what that looks like, and that's certainly what we're working towards, where it's much easier to move between different modes of transport with a single payment system, a set of sort of coherent pricing systems sitting behind that. It's quite difficult at the moment because we have a plethora of different operators, different systems. So that's certainly the vision that we're taking forward through the 2040 strategy and the 5-year delivery plan, and looking to develop what we call mobility as a service, which again is a much more integrated way that people can understand what their travel options are, that they can pay through a single system, they can access a whole variety of different services, whether they're provided directly by TFGM or private operators, but you can give people a much more integrated access to travel. And that's the long-term aspiration, but we've got quite a few steps to be able to get there. And Councillor Meller's talked about bus reform. That's one aspect, that you need to start to integrate those services and enable us actually to properly integrate buses into the rest of our public transport network. So that's the kind of vision, but a lot of hard work to to get us there.
Yeah, sure. And the time frame, so it's really sort of at some point over the period to 2040. That's the vision, is it?
It will be an ongoing process of improved integration, but I hope we can make some real progress over the next 2 or 3 years towards that vision, definitely.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Nicola. Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. What a great conversation. Thank you so much to our speakers for your comments and views. Really, really interesting. And to our audience as well for your engagement. I hope the event has been useful and interesting for everyone watching. I hope it just means that we answered everything that everybody wanted to have addressed. So hopefully that's a good thing. Thanks again to our sponsors, Waterman Group, CMS and D2. If you enjoyed the networking and you want to give it another go, we have a further half hour so that you can stay around and chat to guests and arrange follow-up meetings as well. Our next Place Northwest event will be the Cheshire Development Update on the 26th of November. You can register for this via our website, placenorthwest.co.uk. Thanks so much again for coming today, and we hope to see you very soon. Thanks to our speakers.